Have you ever noticed how you can wake up, brush your teeth, answer messages, go to work, laugh with people, and still feel like none of it is truly you? There is a strange kind of panic that doesn't announce itself with racing heartbeats or shaking hands, but with silence, a quiet dread that sits behind your routine, whispering that you are moving yet not arriving anywhere. You appear present, responsible, even successful to others, but inside, there is a hollow question that never stops echoing. Who am I really, and where am I going? You scroll through your phone as the minutes disappear, watching other lives unfold in polished fragments, and somehow your own life begins to feel like a blurry background character. Conversations happen, plans are made, obligations stack up, yet meaning feels distant, like a word on the tip of your tongue that refuses to be spoken. You feel busy, yet empty, surrounded, yet alone. It is not chaos that defines this state. It is numbness, a soft fog that dulls both pain and purpose at the same time. Somewhere inside you, there is a child who once asked bold questions without fear, who reached for the world without calculating worth first. But now that child feels hidden behind layers of expectations, behind a mask carefully shaped to survive. The mask smiles when it should. The mask performs when it must. The mask keeps you safe in rooms that never truly feel like home. And beneath it, your real face waits in shadow, watching a life that no longer feels authored by you. Psychology tells us that when the attachment bonds meant to anchor us in safety become unstable, the nervous system learns to trade authenticity for survival. The brain becomes efficient at adaptation, but clumsy at self-recognition. Studies on identity diffusion show that when emotional needs are repeatedly unmet, the mind learns to blur the edges of the self in order to avoid rejection. You become what is needed instead of who you are, and slowly, without realizing it, you disappear from your own story. You feel this most in quiet moments, late at night when the noise fades, or in crowded places where your loneliness grows louder. It stings when you see others speak with certainty about dreams, direction, or love, while you struggle to name even one desire that feels truly yours. You begin to wonder if something inside you is broken, if everyone else received a map you somehow missed, and the fear settles in your chest. What if I live my whole life like this and never find myself? Yet this lostness is not an accident. It did not appear overnight. It was shaped, it was learned, it was built as a shelter long before you ever had the language to describe it. And before you can understand where you are now, you must return to where this quiet panic first learned how to survive. Have you ever wondered how someone can grow up surrounded by people and still learn how to abandon themselves so early? Long before you learned the words for confusion or direction, your nervous system was already studying the room, reading faces, listening for danger in silence, learning what version of you was allowed to exist. You were not born lost. You were shaped into someone who learned that being yourself was unsafe, inconvenient, or invisible. There is a child in every story like this. Sometimes that child learns that love arrives only after achievement, after obedience, after perfection. Sometimes that child learns that emotions are heavy burdens no one wants to carry, so they swallow their sadness and quiet their questions. Sometimes the child learns that chaos fills the home, and the only way to survive is to become small, useful, or invisible. In those moments, something subtle but irreversible happens. The child stops asking, "What do I feel?" and starts asking, "What do they need me to be?" Attachment theory tells us that when emotional attunement is inconsistent, the developing brain learns to prioritize connection over authenticity at any cost. The child's nervous system becomes a watchtower, scanning for approval, danger, and rejection. Instead of growing roots inward, toward curiosity and self-trust, the child grows antennae outward. You learn others before you ever learn yourself. You learn how to read tension, how to anticipate disappointment, how to earn safety through performance, silence, or strength. You may not remember the exact moment it happened. It rarely announces itself with drama. It settles quietly, like drought in a garden that once expected rain, The soil still exists, the seeds are still there, but without nourishment, even the most beautiful potential begins to shrink back into itself. Your needs become whispers, your desires hesitate before they speak. Your identity becomes a shadow that follows rules it never chose, and so you grow up carrying a strange contradiction. You become capable, adaptable, responsible, emotionally intelligent in ways that serve everyone but you. You learn how to survive rooms, not how to belong to yourself within them. You become the quiet achiever, the peacekeeper, the strong one, the easy one. All the while, something inside you waits unchosen, unseen, and slowly unnamed. The pain of this childhood wound is not loud. It does not always look like trauma. Sometimes it looks like being fine. But underneath that fine lives a loneliness that has no language yet, a resentment that does not know who to face, and a fear that if you ever stop performing, love will stop arriving. You mistake adaptation for identity. You mistake survival for direction. And this is the truth most people never realize. Feeling lost is not a flaw. It is evidence that you learned to disappear in order to stay connected. What once protected you now confuses you. What once kept you safe now keeps you uncertain. And the child who learned to survive by leaving themselves behind will one day grow into an adult, searching for an identity they were never allowed to keep, unaware that the map was taken long before the journey ever began. Have you ever noticed how easily you slip into a version of yourself that feels useful, impressive, or agreeable, yet strangely unfamiliar once you're alone? The mask does not arrive as a costume you consciously choose. It grows quietly over time, layered from childhood survival into adult identity, until one day you wake up performing a life that looks successful on the outside, but feels hollow from within. You become the high achiever who is never satisfied, the caretaker who forgets their own needs, the strong one who never allows weakness to breathe. You are admired, relied upon, even loved, yet you feel like a shadow standing where a person should be. In adulthood, the child who once learned to survive by disappearing becomes a master of adaptation. You read rooms effortlessly. You sense expectations before words are spoken. You anticipate disappointment before it arrives. Neuroscience shows that the brain, once trained in vigilance, keeps scanning for threat even when none is present. Your nervous system remains armored long after the war has ended, and so you keep moving, building, pleasing, achieving. Not because you want to, but because stopping feels dangerous, rest feels undeserved, stillness feels like exposure. You show up to work and perform competence like a second skin. You show up in relationships moving carefully around conflict, swallowing your truth before it becomes inconvenient. You say, "I'm fine," so often that you forget it was ever a lie. At night, when the world finally quiets, you feel the ache of something unnamed. The life you live no longer feels like an extension of your soul. It feels like a role you memorized too well to abandon. And beneath the mask, the question grows heavier. What do I actually want if no one is watching? Your desires hesitate. Your needs feel foreign. You begin to confuse motion with meaning, noise with purpose, connection with closeness. You drift through routines like a ghost inside your own body, resenting the very structures you once built to stay safe. The monster within is not rage or cruelty. It is exhaustion, suppressed longing, and the quiet grief of becoming someone you needed to be, but were never meant to remain. From the outside, your life appears shaped and stable. From the inside, it feels like a house without windows. You sense that something essential has been locked away, but you cannot remember where the key was taken. You feel trapped in a story that no longer feels authored by you. And yet, walking away terrifies you almost as much as staying, because the mask has become the only identity you recognize. But here is the truth buried beneath the performance. This role was learned, not born. It was shaped by survival, not chosen by selfhood. And if it was learned, it can be understood. The question is no longer merely who you became, but what your body learned to protect you from, and what it is still protecting you from now. Have you ever wondered why your mind feels so loud when you try to rest, yet so empty when you try to decide who you truly are? This is not weakness. This is biology remembering a lesson it learned too early. When identity is suppressed for survival, the brain does not simply forget the self. It reorganizes itself around protection. The child who once learned to stay quiet, to adapt, to disappear emotionally, does not grow into freedom by default. That child grows into a nervous system trained for threat, not truth. Attachment science shows that when emotional safety is inconsistent, the brain's alarm system becomes overdeveloped, while the regions responsible for self-trust and inner clarity grow hesitant. Your amygdala becomes quick to react, but your sense of "I am allowed to be" becomes fragile. The body learns that expressing need risks abandonment, that asserting desire risks rejection, that being untouched emotionally is safer than being seen. Over time, this wiring turns into a life lived on edge, even when nothing is technically wrong. You feel it as restlessness when things are calm. You feel it as guilt when you choose yourself. You feel it as uncertainty when asked what you want. Trauma researchers have long observed that when the nervous system is forced into long-term adaptation, dissociation becomes a quiet companion. You may still function, love, work, and smile, but parts of you remain tucked away behind glass. You become both the actor and the audience to your own life, watching yourself perform emotions you no longer feel fully inside. Identity diffusion grows out of this split. You are many things to many people, yet strangely absent from yourself. Motivation falters not because you are lazy, but because your brain was never taught to link desire with safety. Decisions feel heavy because every choice once carried emotional risk. Even pleasure feels suspicious. The garden of your inner world still exists, but it has grown without water for so long that you begin to believe the dryness is your natural state. You see this in the adult who changes careers repeatedly, not from curiosity, but from hunger. You see it in the partner who feels lonely inside a relationship they once begged to keep. You see it in yourself when you succeed at something and feel nothing afterward but a deeper ache for meaning. The monster within is not self-destruction, it is self-protection that stayed too long. Neuroscience confirms a painful truth. The same circuits that once kept you safe now keep you stuck. Hypervigilance masquerades as ambition. Emotional shutdown disguises itself as independence. The armor you grew is so familiar that laying it down feels like annihilation, and so you remain alert in rooms that no longer threaten you, loyal to fears that no longer serve you. This is the darker paradox of survival. What saved you once now quietly imprisons you, the adaptations. You learn to endure childhood now shape the walls of your adulthood, and until this is seen clearly, not as flaw but as pattern, the question will remain unanswered. Are you living your life or merely defending it from a danger that already passed? Have you ever noticed how you protect yourself so well that you no longer recognize what you are protecting? At some point, survival quietly crosses a line and becomes self-abandonment. What once shielded your heart from pain now also blocks your way back to meaning. You stop trusting your intuition because it once led you into danger. You soften your anger because it once cost you love. You dim your desire because wanting too much once left you empty-handed. And slowly, without a single dramatic moment, you trade aliveness for safety. You begin to live as if your soul is on low volume. You move through days efficiently but not intensely. You chase goals because everyone says they matter. Yet each achievement lands inside you like a stone dropped into shallow water. A quick ripple, no depth, no echo. You enter relationships craving connection, yet something inside you stays folded inward, guarded, distant. You are present without being revealed, you are loved without being known, and the loneliness becomes even sharper because now it lives in rooms that are supposed to feel full. The shadow grows in the quiet spaces, in the endless scrolling that keeps you numb, in the late nights where sleep won't come because your mind refuses silence, in the routines that stabilize you but also imprison you. You feel like a traveler without roots, moving from one distraction to the next, hoping that movement itself will feel like direction. but the garden within you has gone so long without water that even longing feels unfamiliar. Psychologically, this is the cost of long-term emotional self-protection. When intuition is repeatedly punished, it shuts down. When boundaries are repeatedly violated, they dissolve. When anger is never allowed to speak, it turns inward and becomes exhaustion, resentment, or sadness without a clear cause. Trauma studies describe this as functional collapse. You can still operate, still perform, still survive, but the fire of wanting, of choosing, of risking begins to fade. You might even wear this shadow with pride. You call it independence, you call it strength, you call it emotional control. But beneath those names lives a quieter truth. You learn that needing was dangerous, so you taught yourself not to need. The monster within is not destructive impulse. It is the slow forgetting of what makes you feel alive. And the more you forget, the harder it becomes to remember that life was ever meant to feel like more than maintenance. Being lost at this stage no longer feels like confusion. It feels like a controlled disappearance. You are safe from the sharpest pains, yes, but you are also shielded from the deepest joys. You are protected from being shattered, but also from being moved, and this is the cruel bargain survival offers. It can save your heart, but only by slowly teaching it how not to beat too loudly. Yet the shadow does not exist in isolation. It is not sustained by you alone. The world outside you has learned how to benefit from your self-abandonment, and soon it will teach you why staying lost is not only tolerated, but quietly rewarded. Have you ever wondered why the world applauds you most when you feel yourself the least? From the moment you step into adulthood, you are quietly trained to measure your worth in speed, output, comparison, and visibility. The busier you are, the more valuable you seem. The louder your success, the more real you appear. And yet, the more perfectly you perform this role, the further you drift from the quiet center of who you are. Society does not ask you who you are becoming. It only asks how efficiently you can function. You wake up to notifications before you wake up to yourself. You watch strangers win at lives you didn't choose, and somehow their victories feel like accusations against your own stillness. You curate your identity in fragments: the productive version, the confident version, the untouchable version, each one another layer of the mask. And the deeper you sink into this performance, the harder it becomes to remember that your soul was never meant to be managed like a brand. A child once became quiet to survive a home. An adult now becomes busy to survive a world. The same nervous system that learned to stay small now learns to stay productive. Neuroscience shows that constant comparison and digital stimulation keep the brain locked in a dopamine chase, always reaching, never arriving. Hustle culture dresses anxiety as ambition. Emotional suppression disguises itself as strength. Exhaustion wears the costume of discipline, and your inner garden, already dry, is taught to survive on applause instead of water. You feel this in how relationships become negotiations instead of revelations. You feel it in how rest feels like guilt. You feel it in how silence now feels threatening, as if without motion you might finally hear the truths you've been outrunning. The world celebrates your adaptability, but never asks what it cost you. It rewards your compliance, but never teaches you how to choose. It trains you to be useful to systems that never learn your name. Philosophy once asked how to live meaningfully. Modern life asks only how to remain relevant. You wear more roles than you can carry. You answer to more voices than your own. You become fluent in the language of achievement and forget the dialect of your own desire. And still, the emptiness grows, because no amount of validation can replace self-recognition. The cruelest part is that this system flatters your survival wound. It praises the part of you that learned to overfunction. It celebrates the part of you that learned to disappear into performance. It turns your self-abandonment into a marketable strength. And so you stay lost, not because you are incapable of direction, but because being lost keeps you productive, compliant, and quiet. But beneath the noise, your body keeps the original question alive. It whispers it through fatigue that won't lift, through success that doesn't satisfy, through relationships that feel full but not rooted, and eventually the tension becomes unbearable. The tension between who the world trained you to be and who you can no longer afford to forget. And that is when the emotional cost of this disconnection finally begins to surface. Have you ever felt tired in a way that sleep never seems to touch? Not the exhaustion of effort, but the deeper fatigue that settles into your bones when your life moves without a compass. On the outside, you function, you work, you talk, you show up, but inside something begins to fray. Anxiety hums beneath your thoughts like static. You feel restless in stillness and overwhelmed in motion. The world keeps spinning, yet you feel suspended between who you are and who you were meant to become, unable to land in either place. You see it in the mirror on days when your face looks unfamiliar, not because it changed, but because you no longer recognize the person living inside it. You make decisions that feel disconnected from desire. You enter relationships hoping they will give you a sense of direction, yet each one seems to deepen the question instead of answering it. You become emotionally present in moments, then suddenly distant without knowing why. Attachment studies describe this as oscillation between craving connection and fearing it, a nervous system confused by desire, shaped by uncertainty. There is a quiet sadness that follows you, not loud enough to be called despair, but heavy enough to drain color from your days. Burnout creeps in even when your life does not look overwhelming. Depression arrives wearing the mask of numbness rather than grief. You laugh when expected, but the sound feels borrowed. You feel surrounded, yet untouched. You feel needed, yet unseen. And somewhere within you, resentment begins to grow. Not always toward others, but toward the version of yourself that keeps going without knowing why. The child who once lost their inner compass now lives inside an adult who keeps walking without direction. The garden still waits for water, but the gardener has forgotten where the well is. You distract yourself with movement, goals, screens, noise, relationships, anything that keeps you from sitting too long with the emptiness. But emptiness is patient. It waits between conversations. It waits at red lights. It waits at night when your body finally stops running. Identity confusion becomes a silent undertow. You try on versions of yourself like costumes, hoping one will finally feel real. Some days you feel powerful. Other days you feel invisible. Most days you feel unsure. You start to believe something is wrong with you, that others were given a secret you somehow missed. And so you carry a quiet shame for being unable to name your purpose, your direction, your place. Yet the deepest wound is not the confusion itself. It is the loneliness of carrying it alone, the fear that if you admit how lost you feel, you will expose how unfinished your life seems. So you keep functioning, you keep smiling, you keep proving, and inside the monster within tightens its grip, not one of destruction, but of endurance without meaning. But every collapse holds the shape of a possible return. Every exhaustion is a message, not a verdict. The emptiness you feel is not proof that you are broken. It is proof that something essential is trying to come back to life. And slowly, quietly, without spectacle, the question begins to shift. Not, what is wrong with me? But, what part of me has been waiting to be heard? Have you ever noticed how the moment you finally admit you are lost, something inside you exhales for the first time in years? Healing does not begin with grand declarations or sudden transformations. It begins with a quiet reunion, with a pause long enough to let your nervous system realize that you are no longer running from danger, only from yourself. The path back is not a sprint toward greatness, but a slow walk toward honesty, toward the parts of you that learn to hide in order to survive. At first, the return feels awkward, even frightening. You begin to notice emotions instead of bypassing them. You feel anger where there used to be numbness, sadness where there used to be productivity. Longings you once buried begin to push gently against the surface. The brain, shaped for years to anticipate threat, resists this openness. Neuroscience shows that self-trust must be rebuilt like a weakened muscle, through repetition, safety, and patience. Each boundary you speak, each truth you honor, sends a small message to the body. You are no longer alone in here. You start to make smaller choices rooted in your values instead of expectations. You decline invitations that drain you. You sit with discomfort instead of anesthetizing it. You learn that rest is not failure, and saying no is not abandonment. The child who once learned that love required disappearing now begins to learn a new equation, that presence does not require performance. The garden within you does not bloom all at once. It responds to the first drops of water with hesitation, then with curiosity, then slowly with color. There will be moments when the old mask reaches for your face out of habit. There will be days when the monster within whispers that it is safer to stay small, to stay busy, to stay hidden. Healing does not erase these voices. It teaches you to listen without obeying. It teaches you to choose connection over camouflage, expression over endurance, meaning over maintenance. You may not suddenly discover a clear destiny or a single defining purpose. What you begin to recover instead is something more subtle and more powerful, a relationship with yourself that can survive uncertainty, a nervous system that no longer needs constant distraction to feel okay, a sense of identity that feels lived in rather than performed. The lostness does not vanish overnight, but it transforms. It becomes a passage instead of a prison. And the strangest truth emerges as you walk this path. You were never truly broken. You were protecting something fragile and sacred inside you the only way you knew how. The adaptation that once stole your direction also preserved your capacity to feel, to choose, to return. You do not heal by becoming someone new. You heal by uncovering who you were before the world taught you how to disappear. And as this remembering deepens, another question begins to arise, not about fixing yourself, but about the deeper meaning hidden inside the very experience of being lost itself. Have you ever considered that feeling lost might be the first moment you stopped lying to yourself? There is a strange kind of honesty in admitting you don't know who you are anymore. It is the collapse of 1,000 borrowed identities, the quiet fall of masks that once made you feel safe. Most people spend their lives pretending they are certain, pretending they are finished, pretending they were never afraid. But you, standing inside your uncertainty, are standing in a rare and dangerous kind of truth, the kind that can either break you open or seal you shut. A child once looked at the world with wide, unguarded eyes. That child did not chase meaning. They felt it in the warmth of sunlight, in the sound of laughter, in the simple knowing of desire without justification. Somewhere along the way, that child learned to negotiate their existence. The shadow grew, the monster within learned to protect, the garden learned how to survive drought, and now, as an adult, you find yourself wandering not because you have failed, but because you have finally stopped anesthetizing the absence of meaning. Philosophy has always warned that certainty is often a borrowed refuge. Neuroscience reminds us that the brain clings to familiar pain more easily than to unfamiliar freedom. You stayed in motion without direction because at least motion felt like safety. And yet, here you are, tired of running, tired of succeeding at lives that do not belong to you, tired of carrying armor into rooms that no longer threaten you. This exhaustion is not the end of you. It is the end of the illusion that survival was the same thing as living. To be lost is to stand at the edge of a question large enough to rearrange you. Identity is not something you manufacture through productivity or polish through performance. It is something you uncover through honesty, through grief, through listening to what still aches inside you. Meaning is not a destination waiting at the end of achievement. It is a sensation that returns the moment you stop betraying what you feel. You may never wake up one day overflowing with certainty, but you may awaken to something far rarer, a willingness to walk without pretending you already know the way. The world will continue to urge you toward noise, titles, milestones, and applause. But your soul, once heard, will ask only for presence, only for truth, only for continuity between who you are and how you live. And perhaps that is the quiet secret hidden inside the pain of being lost, that it is not a sign you have failed your life, but proof that something real inside you is finally refusing to live a lie. You are not lost because you are broken. You are lost because the false map no longer works, and only when the old directions collapse can the unnamed path beneath your feet finally begin to appear.